Ohlins suspension is very popular amongst die-hard mountain bikers out there. Last year we did a video where Tor reviewed the RXF38 M.2 fork, but behind us we have the updated version. We've got the RXF38 M.3. We also have the updated air shock, the TTX2Air M.2.
That's right, I've got some time riding the new Ohlins suspension under my belt, and in this video we're going to be covering all of the changes inside and out, as well as how it feels out on the trail.
What's up guys, I'm Mike.
I'm Tor.
I didn't ride any of this stuff, but I am here to talk about Ohlins suspension with Tor because he rides this stuff a lot. He spent several weeks riding this probably every day until had a little oopsie and broke a finger.
Yeah, there was a tree that was kind of jumped out of nowhere, and I ended up hitting it pretty good. So I'm off the bike for a little bit, but I have gotten plenty of time on this Ohlins suspension to form some opinions and let you guys know exactly what has changed in this latest generation of fork and shock compared to the previous generation, which I've also got a bunch of time riding in.
And I'm here basically to just ask questions that you guys probably would have. So I've spent a lot of time being around Tor and riding with Tor, talking about suspension, and I kind of know exactly what he likes to ride and how he likes to set his stuff up. I know that he really liked the RXF38 M.2. We've got the M.3 now. Hopefully we don't jumble that too much because it's a lot of numbers and letters and periods and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful every time you say it.
It's a lot to say. But the goal here is to kind of just go over all of the revisions because there's not huge changes. From the outside, it looks very similar, but the inside, there are some cool differences. And we spent some time together kind of looking at those and going over the fine details of all those little revisions because it's kind of something that's under the microscope, but when you look at it on a big picture and kind of bullet point it, a lot of changes happen. So let's start up front with the fork. That is the main character in this video. RXF38 M.3. You were on the M.2 for a while, and I looked at the M.2 for a while. It looks the same as the M.3. From the outside, I just see the shiny lower, so that's an obvious change. I'll just get that one out of the way. Shiny paint instead of matte, and also it says M.3 to signify M.3. So that's how you know if someone has the new fork or the older fork. Yeah,
that's the only difference on the outside. They've got shiny paint. It seems like it's kind of a trendy thing to do now, as well as the updated decals saying M.3.
The actual structure and shape of the fork chassis, the damper, and the air spring are the same. There's just revisions to them. There's revisions to the chassis other than the paint, revisions of the damper, revisions of the air spring. So first up, let's talk about the damper. It seems like this fork relies on the damper quite a bit, same with the M.2, but there's been some changes. So let's talk about them. What are the changes?
Yeah, that's right. So this fork still uses the same TTX18 damper that is used in the previous generation fork, as well as a lot of other forks from Ohlins, their 36 and their downhill 38 fork. They all use the same TTX18 damper. This TTX18 damper has the same adjustments as the previous generation. It's got high and low speed compression, as well as a single rebound knob on the bottom. And for this generation of the RXF38 M.3, it comes with a different tune than the M.2 generation. It's a slightly lighter compression tune. It's the C30 instead of the C40. Ohlins has a setting bank of all of the available tunes for the damper that makes it, if you are going to tune the damper, they've got basically a whole list of washers that you're going to need for each tune of the damper and the order that they go in. And so if you do want to do a custom tune on your damper, Ohlins does make that pretty accessible. But it comes with a different tune that's slightly less racy, a little lighter compression, and should offer a little bit more comfort for a wider range of riders.
The rebound is the same, so just the compression change, correct?
Yep, that's right. The compression's slightly lighter and the rebound is the same tune.
And with the compression lighter, I know that you liked the damped feeling of the M.2, or exactly how that compression tune kind of was. You really adapted around it because you're a little bit more of a race-inspired rider. So do you feel like you still had the range to get it to the point where you liked how stiff the compression was and like it didn't throw you off or anything?
Totally. It's still got that same Ohlins highly damped character. I would say it's stepped down a notch, but I would say that it's still much more highly damped than a Fox or a RockShox fork, and it still has that same just thoroughbred race character that Ohlins is known for. They've got a lot of race wins under their belt with, the specialized race team. Loic Bernie has gotten more world championships than I think anyone else recently with the Ohlins suspension, and they're still staying true to that race-inspired damper philosophy.
I was looking at the spec sheet, and it is worth noting that the external adjustments and the number of clicks on the damper are the exact same as before, so that's all going to feel very familiar if you're coming off of the M.2 fork. I also wanted to ask about high-speed compression. I know that you like to run the high-speed compression pretty wide open on the Mark II. And did you stay the same high-speed compression philosophy with the Mark III?
Yep, I ended up leaving it completely open. Again, it's got only 2 clicks of adjustment, so kind of not that many options to work with. And the last click, fully closed, is meant to be kind of a firm mode for climbing for extra efficiency. And I found that even the click in between open and climbing efficiency kind of leaned in the direction of climbing efficiency and was a little harsh for my taste. And I found that wide open was the support that I was looking for when I was hitting rocks, and it was great.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's hop over to the other side of the fork. We've got the air spring side. There's been some changes to make it a bit more progressive, but overall very similar. And it sounds like the air spring now has support from a little doodad over on the damper side, which is really confusing, but let's have Tor clear that up and talk about the changes.
Yeah, so before we get to the little doodad that Mike is talking about, let's just talk about the actual air spring itself. Ohlins still is using their 3-chamber air spring, just like they do on all their other forks. It's got the main positive chamber, it's got a ramp-up positive chamber, and a negative chamber. The only difference between the air spring in the Mark III compared to the Mark II is the volume spacer setup. They've got an extra volume spacer in the main chamber, extra volume spacer in the ramp-up chamber, and they took the volume spacer out of the negative chamber. And so all those changes are going to make the fork more progressive, deep in the stroke, and also more sensitive in the initial part of the stroke. When I reviewed the previous generation, the M.2 38, it was very sensitive once I removed that negative volume spacer, and that's something that I recommended that everyone who had that fork did to get that real supple feeling off the top. And a lot of other reviewers online were saying the same thing. And Ohlins has gone ahead and made that change to the 3rd generation of this fork. They've taken it out from the factory, so you don't have to crack your fork open to make it really sensitive off the top to max the sensitivity of a Fox or a RockShox fork. Now, it just comes like that, which is great.
So it sounds like the structure is the same, but some things are moved around. Does that change anything with the air pressure and how you think about that, how you tune it?
Yeah, totally. On the previous fork, I was actually maxed out on the air pressure of the ramp-up chamber just to get that hold up in big hits. I was at 250 PSI, which is the max, but now I'm way lower. I'm at about 210, I think. And I think that makes the fork, it makes the air spring more usable for a wider range of riders. I'm 175 pounds, and I was maxed out on the air pressure. So that's going to be limiting for someone who's heavier than me, is going to need more air pressure on the fork. You can now have that in the RXF38 M.3. So that's a really welcome change for all riders, I think.
That's great. Air spring, damper, separate. But now we've got a spring booster in the damper side, which was really confusing. We were just racking our brains looking at this and talked to Alex, our head mechanic here, to kind of get an idea of how it works. But I think we've got the idea of how it works, and it's pretty interesting. So, spring booster.
Yeah, it's actually not that complicated. We just, it took us a little too long to figure it out. But basically, there is a seal at the bottom of the damper that sits basically at the bottom of the stanchion, and it closes off the air chamber in the lowers, the damper side lowers of the fork, and essentially creates another air spring in your damper side to make the fork, again, more progressive. And it's another incremental change that makes the fork more progressive. That's kind of the takeaway. If it's confusing, I understand I probably didn't do the best job explaining it.
It sounds super complicated, but it is very simple. You have all this air in the lower part of the fork and the upper part of the fork in the stanchions, and you're basically just shrinking it so that when you compress through the fork, you only have air in the lowers, and then there's a smaller volume of air down there, and it just makes it a little bit more progressive. Probably not going to be super noticeable to people with the air version of the fork because you already have so much going on in the air spring and most of the progression and all the actual air is pumped into that. But if you have the coil version, which the Mark III is still adaptable or convertible over to coil, just like the Mark II, same kit and everything. But with the spring booster on the damper side, that just gives you a little bit of progression. If it's going to be noticeable, it's going to be noticeable in the coil version of the fork, most likely.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's really cool that Ohlins actually offers an OEM coil conversion for this fork. There's definitely a lot of aftermarket coil kits for some other brands, and Ohlins is actually offering this just from the factory, which is pretty cool. I know that there's a lot of people who enjoy coil rear shocks and haven't really tried coil forks, and so it's a really good opportunity to try a coil fork if you're into that. Ohlins does offer that from the factory.
And worth noting, this spring booster doodad is also available as an aftermarket option. It's what, like 35 bucks or something, and you can fit it in multiple different models of Ohlins forks, backwards compatible.
Yep, that's right. The spring booster actually came out in the RXF38, the latest one, and Ohlins didn't really make a big deal out of it. They were kind of quiet about it, but it's also applied in the new 38. And yeah, like Mike was saying, if you have the previous gen RXF38, maybe with a coil, and you want to get a little more progressivity in that fork, you can get the spring booster, install it, and there, your fork's more progressive.
Do you ever imagine what would happen if Ohlins hired like a marketing guy from Rock Dr. Fox and they just like upped their budget a little bit? I feel like that would have been like 50 slides on a PowerPoint presentation on how the spring booster is going to like change lives. So it's funny to hear like that this isn't even new for this fork behind us. It came out already and like no one even knows it exists.
Yeah. I think that if if they had the marketing budget of some of these other bigger companies, I think that a lot more people would be riding Ohlins suspension. But here we are, doing their marketing for them.
All right, we spent some time on the inside of the fork. Let's go to the outside again. Not only did we notice that they polished up the paint on the outside, made it nice and glossy, but they also did some micro polishing on the stanchions. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's a micro polish, but Ohlins claims big performance out of this change. On any kind of hard anodized surface, if you look close enough, there's going to be some imperfections there. There's going to be some peaks and some valleys that, if you're just rubbing your hand on it, you wouldn't feel it, but they're in there. They're
microscopic. We're talking microscopic level.
Yeah, micro polishing for microscopic imperfections. And so what they've done is they've smoothed down those imperfections. They've taken the peaks off, but they've left the valleys. And so the idea is that oil can sit in those tiny little valleys and hit the seals, keep your fork super lubricated, but you don't have those peaks in there catching your seals as the fork is functioning. So that's the update with the micro polishing. Ohlins claims that there's a big performance difference, and yeah, it's, again, a micro improvement.
I mean, it feels smooth on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it feels smooth on the trail.
Yeah, it's just like the last generation. This fork feels incredibly high quality when you're riding it. It's kind of an intangible thing that I can't quite put my finger on, but everything about this fork feels incredibly high quality. The damping, while it is much firmer, it's not harsh, it's very supportive, and I feel like it's a fork that wants you to ride at your personal limit. And you don't have to be going, at the theoretical limit, like Loic Bruni when he's winning all those world championships. If you are riding at your personal limit, then you're going to appreciate the performance of this fork and how it kind of eggs you on to find that limit.
This probably isn't a good descriptive word for suspension that's supposed to be plush, but it seems like the way you put it, the Ohlins forks just feel solid.
They do feel solid. Yeah, they do feel solid. And if you're someone who likes to tinker a lot with all of your suspension, this thing has almost limitless tinkering opportunities with the 3-chamber air spring. If you're messing with the ratio between your ramp-up chamber and your main chamber, you're able to kind of play with where the progression in the fork starts to come on. You can adjust it to come on later in the travel or earlier in the travel. That's something that is really not possible with a 2-chamber system. And there's even volume spacers you can put in the main chamber and the ramp-up chamber, and it is a bottomless pit of tunability within the air spring.
If you like getting yourself overwhelmed or you feel really comfortable tinkering with suspension, this is probably for you.
And if you're not that person, the recommended air settings on the 3rd generation RXF38 are much more rideable than on the 2nd generation. I have gone up a little bit in air pressure from the recommended settings, but not much at all. And that wasn't the case with the 2nd gen. I went way up in air pressure in both the main chamber and the ramp-up chamber, but I'm really close to recommended settings on this 3rd gen.
All right, that's enough about the fork.
Yep.
Let's go to the back of the bike. The shock. I spent some time riding the previous version, the Mark I, I guess, and it felt great. It was a great shock. It had its own unique characteristics compared to others that I tried, but overall, very solid piece of equipment. And now we have some updates. The way that you are going to tell is that there are 2 yellow stripes on the outside, and there's also a couple of improvements on the inside. So let's talk about them. What's going on the inside?
Yeah, inside, the damper is completely redesigned. They're using a bladder-style damper instead of the IFP that was used in the 1st generation. And that bladder-style damper is also what's used in their coil shock, which is, for whatever reason, way more popular than their air shock. I feel like I see so many Ohlins coil shocks out there, and it's so rare to see one of their air shocks. And so, yeah, they're applying some of the technology found in the coil shock to the air shock now. The name TTX that Ohlins uses for their air shocks actually tells a little story. It means twin tube damping. And so, yeah, this has a twin tube damper in it. And on the outside, you've got a few classic adjustments: low speed compression, high speed compression, and rebound. And those adjustments are actually very similar to the ones found on the Fork. I use the low speed the low speed compression a lot to tune the shock. But again, the high speed compression is a lever with just a couple of positions, giving you that climb mode fully closed, and open is pretty much where I left it because I found that it added too much damping for my preference, and fully open was exactly what I was looking for. Give me the support in those big impacts that you rely on high speed compression for. And yeah, I found that the rebound and low speed compression were very usable in the range of compression, and I was able to pretty much lean on those two adjustments to get the shock fully set up. And in the air spring, we've got the same general architecture, but we do have a new seal head and some new seals and O-rings that are lower friction to just make that shock incredibly sensitive, both off the top and deep in the travel. And yeah, this is, again, just going to be generally minor updates, but stepping towards the perfect shock from Ohlins.
And we have micro polishing on the shock, too.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so they've got the same micro polish on the stanchion of the shock that's mirrored exactly on the Fork.
And for anyone looking for a more progressive shock, they also make the TTX2Air slimmed down to the TTX1Air, smaller air volume, more progression. So if you have a bike or a riding style that just needs a little bit more progression out of the shock's air spring curve, then that one's for you. And that has all the same updates. We have ridden that in the past year. We referred to it as the Slim Jim just because it is visually more slim than the TTX2Air with its smaller volume air can. And it's got its own set of riding characteristics. We didn't have anyone here that stuck with that shock long term, and most of us just preferred the TTX2, but the TTX1 rides kind of in its very own way. It's got a lot of pop to it. So if that's something that you are interested in, that shock is available and has the same updates as the TTX2Air.
One thing that we forgot to cover in the shock is the updated stroke change system. Now it is way easier to change the stroke on the Mark II of the TTX Air shocks. Before, you had to do basically a full shock rebuild to change the stroke of that shock, and now you just have to pop the air can off and clip it on. You can adjust it in 2.5 mil increments up to 7.5 mil. And yeah, when you buy the shock, it's going to come in the full stroke length of your eye-to-eye length. And then if your shock requires, or if your bike requires a shorter stroke length, you can do that on your own super easily. All you need is a bottom bracket tool to pop the air can off, slap that stroke spacer on there, and button it back up. So yeah, that's another welcome change to the new Ohlins TTX2Air Mark II.
All right, now that we're done looking at the revisions to this new Ohlins suspension, let's just talk about how it rides, who it's for. And I think worth noting is that what people most commonly see right away when they're looking into suspension upgrades is that Ohlins has a higher price than the other two big players in the game. That's Fox and RockShox. Tor, how did you like the stuff on the trail? And is that premium price worth it over the two other big dogs?
For me, personally, I think that price is worth it. It aligns more with my preferences as someone who's a little bit more race-oriented as a rider, but I don't think that you have to be a super die-hard racer to enjoy this suspension. Ohlins has done a great job of lightening the compression tune a bit, which is going to make it appeal to a wider range of people, maybe someone who is just looking for a premium suspension option. And I think that this is exactly that. It is the more premium suspension option over Fox or RockShox. The highly damped feel gives me generally more control in all situations on trail. It keeps me from becoming a bobblehead during big impacts. I know that we've all had that feeling where you have a big head slap, and I find that that happens less often on the Ohlins suspension. And overall, I think that if you do have a little bit of extra cash to spend on your suspension, I think that Ohlins is exactly where I would go with that extra bit of coin.
And that doesn't mean that everyone needs to go get it. It's, you know, obviously better for certain types of riding. And there's so many great options on the market that you have great choices for no matter what type of budget or riding style you're in. But yeah, for Tor's riding style, this seems to fit perfect. He rants and raves about it and plans on continuing to ride it. So that's always a good sign. We have so much suspension come across the table here that we slap on our bikes and ride. It's good when something makes it on our bikes that we're really stoked on and want to keep riding. And goes to show that Ohlins is doing a good job kind of cornering a certain segment of riding, and it's cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to get some Ohlins suspension of your own, we've got it on our site, thelostco.com. We've got free shipping on orders over $50 in the United States. And we've also got more than just suspension. We've got pretty much everything that you could want for your bike. So check us out.
Yeah, if you have any questions on anything, including suspension or anything else, let us know. We'll be happy to help. But until next time, yeah, we'll just get some other suspension to try out and see how that feels, and we'll see you then.
Report back later. See ya.